The night my husband excused himself to take a call, I thought nothing of it. We were seated at a corner table at Harrington's, the kind of restaurant where the lighting is soft and the portions are small and everything costs too much. It was our 35th wedding anniversary. 35 years. I had worn the blue dress he said he loved, the one I'd kept in the back of the closet for occasions that deserved it. He stood up, kissed me on the forehead, and said he'd be right back. Just a quick call. Business. I watched him disappear through the glass doors toward the parking lot, and I remember thinking how strange it was that his jacket was already on. You don't put your jacket on for a quick call. I was looking down at my water glass when the woman sat down across from me. She didn't ask. She didn't hesitate. She simply pulled out the chair my husband had just left and lowered herself into it like she had every right in the world to be there. She was older than me, maybe 75, with silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her neck and the kind of posture that told you she had once been someone people paid attention to. She was wearing a cream-colored blazer and pearl earrings, and she looked at me with eyes that were calm but completely serious. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, and she didn't sound sorry at all. She sounded like a woman who had made a decision and was committed to it. "But I need to speak with you before he comes back. My name is Frances Alderton, and I believe you are Clara Harmon." I stared at her. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know your husband, and I know what tonight is supposed to be." She reached into her handbag and placed an envelope on the table between us. It was sealed, slightly thick, and had nothing written on the outside. "Don't open this here," she said. "Put it in your purse right now, and listen to me very carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. I don't know why I picked up the envelope. I don't know why I didn't stand up and walk away or signal the waiter or do any of the reasonable things a person might do when a stranger sits down at their anniversary dinner and starts talking like that. But there was something in her face, something steady and deliberate that bypassed my instincts and went straight to whatever part of me had been quietly uneasy for months without knowing why. I picked it up and slipped it into my bag. "Good," she said. She glanced toward the front of the restaurant, then back at me. 3 years ago, my daughter sat at a table very much like this one with a man very much like your husband. His name was different. The scheme was the same. She signed documents she didn't understand on what she thought was the best night of her life. 6 months later, she had nothing. No home, no savings, no business. He had moved everything into entities she had never heard of and had no access to. By the time she understood what had happened, it was already done. I felt something shift in my chest. What does that have to do with my husband? Victor Harmon and the man who took everything from my daughter were partners. They used the same attorney, the same structure, the same timing. She looked at me steadily. The same restaurant. The room felt suddenly very loud and very far away at the same time. "Tonight," she said, "he's going to ask you to sign something. He may call it a gift. He may call it an investment. He may say it's for tax purposes, or for protecting what you've both built, or for simplifying your retirement. Whatever words he uses, what he'll be handing you is a transfer of ownership. Your half of Harmon Property Group, your name off the deed of your home. Everything you contributed over 35 years moved quietly into a holding company you have never heard of. And once you sign, Clara, there is nothing left that belongs to you." My mouth had gone dry. I reached for my water glass and missed it. "How do you know this?" I managed. "Because I hired someone to find out," she said simply. "After what happened to my daughter, I swore I would not let it happen to another woman if I could help it. I have been watching Victor Harmon for 14 months. The envelope contains copies of documents, correspondence between him and his attorney, the formation papers for the holding company, and a letter from my own lawyer explaining exactly what it all means." She stood up then, smoothing her blazer as though this had been a perfectly ordinary conversation. "Don't go home tonight," she said quietly. "Go somewhere he doesn't expect. Read what's in that envelope, and call an attorney in the morning before you speak to him." She glanced toward the door one more time. "He's coming back. Don't tell him we spoke." And then she walked away, back to a table across the room where a younger woman was watching us, and she sat down and picked up her menu as if nothing had happened. Victor came back 30 seconds later, smelling of cold air and cologne, smiling the smile I had loved for 35 years. He poured himself more wine and asked if I decided on the salmon or the chicken. I said, "The chicken." I watched his hands. I watched his face. I tried to find the man I thought I knew underneath the man she had just described to me, and I couldn't tell the difference, and that was the most frightening thing of all. I should tell you something about my life before I tell you what happened next, because it matters. I am 62 years old. I spent my 30s building a small real estate appraisal firm while Victor built his property development company. And somewhere in year 7 of our marriage, we merged them. Not officially, not on paper, but practically. I contributed clients, contacts, and 12 years of knowledge about property values across 4 counties. He contributed the capital. We shook hands on a dinner table in our kitchen, and we both said we didn't need lawyers because we were married, and that had seemed like a reasonable thing to say at the time. The problem with not putting things on paper when you're married is that your share exists largely in trust. And trust, as it turns out, can be restructured without your signature if someone is patient enough and clever enough and has the right attorney. Harmon Property Group was worth approximately $4 million. My name appeared in some places and not others. I had stopped paying close attention to the legal architecture years ago because I believed I didn't need to. Victor handled the business side. I handled the appraisals. We had a system. What I didn't know was that over the past 2 years, Victor had been quietly and methodically building a parallel structure. A holding company called Vestmark Holdings, LLC, registered in Delaware, with one owner listed, Victor A. Harmon. The property group's assets had been transferred into Vestmark in stages, each transaction small enough not to trigger anything obvious. Our home had been refinanced 18 months ago. Victor had told me it was to take advantage of better rates, and the new deed listed only his name. I learned all of this sitting in the parking lot of a Marriott 8 miles from the restaurant, with the overhead light on and Francis Alderton's envelope open on my lap. The documents were organized, tabbed, annotated. Someone had done this carefully. There were formation papers for Vestmark. There were emails between Victor and a man named Douglas Quill, Esquire, discussing timing and the anniversary approach and ensuring signatures are obtained in a relaxed, celebratory context. There was a letter from Francis's attorney, Gerald Park, explaining in plain English what each document meant and what would happen the moment I signed whatever Victor planned to put in front of me. And there, at the very back, was a photograph. Victor and a man I didn't recognize, standing outside what looked like a courthouse, both of them smiling. The date stamp on the photo was 3 years ago. On the back, in neat handwriting, Douglas Quill and Victor Harmon, day of Harmon Properties refinance filing. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. I did not cry. I had been the kind of woman who cries, and I had also been the kind of woman who doesn't. And that night in that parking lot, I was purely the second kind. I felt cold, and I felt clear, and I felt something I can only describe as a door opening inside me into a room I had never been in before. I called my sister. Donna is 3 years younger than me, and she has never liked Victor. She had said so exactly twice in 35 years, once at our wedding rehearsal and once at our mother's funeral, and both times I had told her she was wrong. And she had let it go because she loved me more than she needed to be right. When I told her what was in the envelope, she didn't say I told you so. She said, "Come here right now." I drove to Donna's house and I sat at her kitchen table and she made coffee, and we read through every document again, slowly, together. Her husband, Gary, a semi-retired insurance attorney, sat with us, and he went very quiet, in the way that lawyers go quiet when they're reading something that confirms the worst. "This is real," Gary said finally. "This is sophisticated and deliberate, and it has been in motion for a long time." He looked at me over his reading glasses. "You need someone tomorrow morning. Not afternoon. Morning." "What do I do about tonight?" I asked. "Don't go home," Donna said, before Gary could answer. "You stay here. He'll call. Let him." Victor called 4 times between 11 and midnight. I watched my phone light up each time, and I let it go to voicemail. His messages were even, slightly puzzled, with the particular tone of a man who is not yet worried, but is beginning to calculate. "Hey, just wondering where you ended up. Give me a call when you get a chance." Then, "Clara, it's late. Just want to make sure you're okay." Then quieter, "I have something I wanted to talk to you about tonight. Nothing urgent, just call me." Nothing urgent, right? I turned the phone face down and slept 3 hours on Donna's guest bed with the envelope on the nightstand. At 8 the next morning, I was sitting across from a woman named Patricia Osei, family and business law, whose name Gary had given me. She had short, natural hair and a direct way of speaking that I appreciated immediately. I put the envelope on her desk, and she read for 20 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up and said, "How much of the business have you actually touched in the last 5 years? Clients you personally brought in? Appraisals under your license? Correspondence in your name?" "All of it," I said. "I have records, emails, signed reports, everything." She nodded slowly. "Good. That matters, because what he's tried to do here is sever the paper connection between your contributions and your ownership interest. But paper is not the only kind of evidence." She tapped the envelope. "And the fact that he had this prepared and planned to present it tonight establishes intent in a way that is going to be very useful to us." "Can I undo what's already been done?" I asked. "The refinance? The Vestmark transfers?" "Not easily, but potentially yes. Fraudulent transfer law exists for situations like this. If we can show that assets were moved with intent to deprive you of your rightful interest, we can challenge those transactions." She looked at me steadily. "This is not going to be fast, and it is not going to be comfortable, but you have more ground to stand on than he expected you to." I nodded. I had not expected fast. Fast was not what I was after. What I was after was accurate and complete and correct. I went back to Donna's house and I called Victor. He answered on the first ring, which told me he'd been waiting. "Clara, thank God. I was worried sick." "I'm fine," I said. "I stayed at Donna's." A pause. "Is everything okay? You left without saying anything." "I wasn't feeling well," I said. "I needed some air." Another pause, slightly longer. "I wanted to talk to you last night. There's something I'd like to go over with you. Some paperwork, just housekeeping stuff. It won't take long." "Of course," I said. "Let's set something up." I kept my voice perfectly ordinary. I had spent 35 years being ordinary with this man, and I found I could still do it, the way you can still ride a bicycle even if you haven't been on one in years. Some things your body remembers. I did not sign anything. I did not go back to the house that week or the week after. I stayed at Donna's and I worked with Patricia and I gathered everything I had. 7 years of appraisals under my license, client files, emails, contracts with my name on them, a business checking account that still listed me as a signer. I called 3 clients directly and asked them to provide written confirmation that their relationship had been with me personally. All 3 said yes without hesitation. Patricia filed a motion to freeze the Vestmark assets pending investigation of fraudulent transfer. She filed a separate action asserting my ownership interest in the property group based on constructive trust and unjust enrichment. Victor's attorney, Douglas Quill, responded within 48 hours, which Patricia said was faster than expected, and indicated they were rattled. What happened over the following 4 months I will not describe in full, because some of it is still bound by terms I agreed to, and some of it is simply too tedious to recount. What I will tell you is this. The case did not go to trial. 2 weeks before the scheduled hearing date, Victor's side made an offer. Patricia called me on a Tuesday afternoon and read it to me over the phone, and I sat very still, and then I said, "What do you think?" She said, "I think it's less than what a court might award you. I also think courts are unpredictable, and this removes the risk entirely, but this is your decision, not mine." I asked her to give me 24 hours. I drove that afternoon to Frances Alderton's home, which I had found through Gerald Park, her attorney, who had agreed to pass along my contact information. She lived in a white colonial house in a quiet neighborhood with a porch that wrapped around the front, and she was sitting on that porch when I pulled up, as if she had been expecting me, though I'd only called an hour before. We sat in rocking chairs and she brought out iced tea and we talked for 2 hours. She told me about her daughter, whose name was Renee, and what had happened to Renee, and how Renee had spent 3 years rebuilding from almost nothing, and how she was doing now. Better, Frances said. Not all the way back, but better. I asked her why she had approached me that night. Specifically, why not report what she'd found to authorities or simply warn me anonymously? She looked at her iced tea for a moment. "Because anonymous doesn't look someone in the eye," she said, "and I needed you to believe me. I needed to be there, in front of you, so you could see that I was real and that I meant it." A letter gets thrown away. A stranger sitting down at your table on your anniversary is not something you throw away. She was right. I had not thrown it away. I told her about the settlement offer. She listened without interrupting. "What do you want?" she asked when I finished. "I want what I built," I said. "I want it acknowledged. I want the record to be accurate." "Then make sure the settlement says so," she said. "In writing? In plain English. Not just money, the acknowledgement." I went back to Patricia the next morning and I told her what I wanted. She went back to Douglas Quill's office and she got it. The final agreement included not only a financial settlement that Patricia described as substantial, but a written acknowledgement signed by Victor that my contributions to Harmon Property Group had been material, continuous, and essential to its value, that my ownership interest had been real, that the transfers to Vestmark had been improper. It wasn't a courtroom. There was no audience, no stage, no moment of public exposure, just a conference room and two attorneys and a man who could not quite look me in the eye when he signed. But I want to tell you something about that moment, because it mattered more than I expected it to. When Victor signed that acknowledgement, when he put his name on a document that said, in legally binding language, that I had been real and my contributions had been real and what he had tried to do had been wrong, something settled in me that I hadn't realized was still moving. Not satisfaction exactly, not relief. Something quieter, something like the feeling of a room finally being level after you've been standing on a slanted floor for so long that you forgot what level felt like. I kept my half. I restructured the property group with Patricia's guidance, properly this time. Every ownership interest documented and recorded. I brought in a new business partner, a woman I had known for years who had her own appraisal firm and had always said we should work together. We renamed the company. We registered it correctly. My name is on every document, in every filing, in every county record. Donna came to the signing and brought champagne that she had been keeping in her refrigerator for the occasion, which tells you something about Donna. Gary made a toast that was dry and precise and exactly right. Francis Alderton sent me a card. It said simply, "Glad it went right this time." I keep it on my desk. I am going to tell you something now that I want you to hear carefully, especially if you are a woman who has been in a long marriage or a long partnership, and you have allowed someone else to handle the complicated parts because you trusted them, and because trust, when it is good, is the most efficient system there is. Trust is not the problem. The problem is when trust becomes a reason to stop paying attention. When love becomes a reason not to know your own numbers, not to read your own documents, not to understand the legal architecture of everything you have spent your life building. I don't say this to frighten you. I say it because I am 62 years old and I spent 35 years being an expert in property valuation, and I still let the paper trail of my own ownership get blurry. If I could do it, any of us can do it. Know what you own. Know whose name is on what. Read things before you sign them. Not because you don't trust the person handing them to you, but because a signature is a permanent thing, and trust is not a legal instrument. I am fine. More than fine. I wake up in the mornings now, and I feel the particular cleanness of a life whose edges are known to me. I know what I have, and where it is, and what my name is on. It took a woman I had never met sitting down across from me at the worst possible moment and telling me the truth I didn't know I needed to hear, and I have thought about that many times in the months since. There is a kind of courage that happens quietly, in ordinary restaurants, between strangers. Frances Alderton sat down across from me when she had no obligation to, when it cost her something, when it might not have worked. She did it anyway because her daughter had lost everything, and she had decided that the only thing she could do with that grief was point it at something useful. I have thought about Renee, Frances's daughter, more than Frances probably knows. I have thought about all the women who signed when asked to and didn't have a Frances at the next table. And I have thought about what it would mean to be one of those women. And the thought is not abstract to me because I was 12 minutes away from being one of them. 12 minutes. The length of a phone call in a parking lot. If you are watching this and something in this story is familiar to you, not the specific details, but the shape of it, the quiet way power can shift around you while you are busy trusting, please do not wait for a stranger to sit down across from you. Go look at the papers, call the attorney, know your own name on your own things. And if you have a Frances in your life, tell her what she's worth.